We are going to be talking about how Britain's Conservatives seem to actually be rallying.
Yeah, exciting.
Shocking.
Yeah.
How has this happened? Keir Starmer's Blairism on steroids, and of course the Eurovision Song Contest, which I hate. Anyway, before we begin, we'll be doing our second Rumble exclusive live hangout on the question, or the meme, should I say, we were never asked. Now, this is quite a spicy thing to say, but Bo and I are going to explore exactly why this is powerful, because it is a powerful statement. I'm not going to spoil any of it, but there's a lot that we're going to go through that's going to be very interesting there. So anyway, let's begin. Britain's Conservatives are currently engaged in the National Conservative Conference, the first National Conservative Conference, and Connor is currently there, and I'm sure that he'll be back tomorrow, and I'm sure that he's going to give us a much more in-depth look at that than I'm going to give. I'm just going to be talking about the sort of external reaction to it, because it's gone down, well, from my perspective, very well. From the left's perspective, some sort of apocalyptic disaster. Right? And anything that the left considers an apocalyptic disaster has got to have some values.
Yeah, well, there are those on the right who are sort of, not satisfied by this thing, saying it's containment and that it's not enough, not good enough. But actually anything that gets our enemies screeching in this way, surely that can be only a good thing. Right?
Well, a good point's been made. I've seen certain rat-like scholars make the point that this is advancing the dialectic in the direction of the right. Whereas normally it's the constant conservative loss of the dialectic in the direction of the left. And that is in and of itself an excellent thing.
Yeah, it's positive movement. I mean, we were saying before we came on, just getting all of these people in a room together is a fantastic thing. That's progress in and of itself towards, moving, as you say, as a certain Persian scholar likes to talk about, moving the dialectic in our direction.
Yeah, and this is unusual for a lot of conservatives, because I think a lot of conservatives are kind of committed to the loss at this point.
Yeah, well, I think there are actually those on our side who, in a sense, enjoy being men among the ruins, if you want. There is a kind of relish in it. Yeah, but actually, you and I, as we know, recognise that positive vision is what's important here.
There is a kind of nobility that they glean from this, and I don't blame them, because I do understand where they're coming from, but you've got to be able to take your wins, because the good thing about the Conservative Conference is that conservative values, authentic conservative values, are what are prized there. So you can essentially make those arguments and start rolling things in that direction. Yeah. But anyway, before we go on, if you want to support us, go sign up for the website, £5 a month, help us keep the lights on, because of course we're demonetized everywhere else. And go and watch our podcast. Martin Luther King was not a conservative hero, because a lot of conservatives these days don't seem to understand that he was basically a radical leftist. Probably something that conservatives should be aware of. Anyway, moving on. So national conservatism was trending on Twitter, right? That's how I really started paying attention to this, to be honest. And there's a chap on Twitter called Jack Hadfield, who is at the conference at the moment. If you can go to the next one, John. He's live tweeting coverage. So if you want a sort of rolling coverage, Jack is doing the Lord's work there. So it spans over multiple days, like 3 days long, I think it is. Yeah. This is the final day. And last night they were at the British Museum, Natural History Museum, with the giant whale above them, which is a disappointing replacement for the Diplodocus, in my opinion.
Great choice of venue, though, I thought. I mean, that looks spectacular.
Beautiful choice of venue. Yeah. And as you can see there, Douglas Murray was giving a talk, which went down well. How do you think that was described by your average leftist on Twitter?
Oh, fascist, national. Oh, there we go. What a surprise.
What a surprise. What a surprise.
Oh, climate denial alongside fascism and
climate
nationalism.
denial, yeah.
My goodness.
What I love, what I don't love actually about this is that I actually think that this was slightly, this particular framing from Douglas was slightly too much British understatement, because they did start reacting poorly to this, but I think we'll cover that a bit later. Okay. But anyway, so this was, of course, led to the Conservative Conference being disavowed by the Natural History Museum.
Oh, no, I didn't see this. Champions diversity, equality and inclusion of all people. Yes. Okay. Well, I mean, obviously a celebration of a native culture is evil, apparently.
I mean, it's only the British Natural History Museum.
Indeed.
How could members of the British government be allowed?
Yeah. I mean, you speak about this sometimes, but inclusion here stated as a kind of prime value. Well, I'm not being funny. The only things worth having in life is that which is exclusive.
Yep.
You know, this conference is a kind of, it's being framed at least by certain people as a nationalist conference. And whether we want to look at it like that or not, it's certainly an expression of patriotism.
Yeah.
And that's necessarily exclusive.
Yes.
And that's what makes it good.
Yes, and that's why they kept out all the left-wing media.
Yeah.
And the left-wing media were screeching hysterically about this.
I did see some protesters got in.
Yeah, we'll get to those.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it got disavowed and then it got smeared. Here's an anti-racist organization.
Pink News.
Speaking very kindly about a woman of colour. Suella Braverman has been talking about penises at a right-wing Christian conference.
Yeah, I wonder what she had to say about penises.
Well, that's really not that's really not what was interesting about what Suella Braverman was saying. And what is interesting about Suella Braverman though is she does genuinely seem to actually be a conservative.
Well, she does. I'm actually very impressed by a lot of what she says. I mean, she speaks
here.
like someone like you in many cases, actually. And I must say, right, I want to be careful how I say this.
Go on.
You pointed when the Tory leadership race was happening. You pointed out that Steve Baker didn't run, and your theory was that was because he may have held the same opinions as somebody like Suella Braverman, but his he didn't fit the right identity categories.
Quite possibly.
And I wonder how much of that is a part of somebody like Suella Braverman being able to say the things that she says. Because she has a certain level of I hesitate to use the word privilege. Yeah.
Yeah, there's doubtless that. And I've noticed that the leftist critiques of her have just overcome that and they're just calling her a Nazi. And saying, okay,
yeah, no doubt.
Okay. Yeah. But she said, conservatives must always be honest with the public, honest about our principles, honest about our priorities. In a way, we distinguish ourselves from the left. The leader of the left, Sir Keir Starmer, he opposes today the things he stood for yesterday. He'll change his mind on tomorrow and he'll campaign on next year as a great man of principle. Although given his definition of woman, I can't rule him out running for the Labour's first female prime minister. And she also made the point that it was an unfashionable fact that 100% of women do not have a penis, which apparently got a great round of applause, which, I mean, yes.
Like it's
low standard.
If it needs to be said, then sure. But like it's depressing that is what gets like a standing ovation at a national conservative conference in 2023.
It just shows how much the left controls the discourse.
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
the problem. Yeah. When that's the hill we have to die on. Yeah. But anyway, excuse me. A giant fat man decided to interrupt her. Because he's a racist, I assume.
It must be, yeah.
I mean, it's just kind of embarrassing that this is the quality of protester that the left has.
I mean, what's this guy's day job? Why is he here? Why is he doing this? I mean, yeah, this footage is out there forever now.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
very unusual.
Anyway, so Suella Braverman had come out and controversially said that, quote, white people do not exist in a special state of sin or collective guilt.
Controversial.
Yes. Well,
not racial sins of the father.
It's literally controversial because everyone has created a giant controversy around what I think should be a fairly milquetoast statement.
Benign. Yeah.
I mean, I would say this about any group of people. They aren't actually guilty for what their ancestors did.
Yeah. I don't even think Germans should have collective guilt.
No. No. I lived in Germany for 8 years. Yeah. Every German I met was lovely, and every single one of them apologized to me because I was British for World War II. And I was like, well, it wasn't your fault, and I wasn't involved.
Yeah, wasn't born.
And it's not that I don't appreciate, like, we're part of a heritage, and I can completely appreciate that the Germans have got a burden there. But I felt it was just my job to try and make them feel less like they were bad people, because they weren't bad people. They were really nice people.
I mean, it's good. It's good. As much as this is low-hanging fruit, and as much as this shouldn't be the things that are making headlines in the way that they are, it is good that the Home Secretary is saying things like this.
Yes.
Now, that said, she is the Home Secretary. And yet she speaks as if she's the shadow Home Secretary.
We'll get to that in a second,
no
because it is just insufferable.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's actually her fault. That's the thing. I get the feeling. In fact, we'll cover that in a minute.
Yeah.
So, she also said that multiculturalism was a recipe for communal disaster and doubled down on controversial remarks, again, more controversial statements of truth, about grooming gangs being almost all British Pakistani. Okay, but we can literally just look at the people who have been arrested and convicted for it. She argued you cannot have immigration without integration. People who come here should embrace and respect this country. Wild, radical statements from the Conservative Home Secretary.
Fascist, I hear.
They must not commit crimes, average fascist. I just can't say this with a straight face. They may practice any faith or none, and they need to respect everyone else's right to do the same. They need to learn English and understand British social norms and mores, which is not to say they cannot enrich and add to our culture. Above all, they cannot simply turn up and say, I live here now, you have to look after me. I don't want to have to take this seriously because it seems just like such obvious.
Yeah. Do you know what though? That one of those things she said in there about having to speak English when you're in England or Britain, that for whatever reason, that particular point is always really to certain people, it's always really very, very offensive. And I've never understood that because, we think about the British in Spain, for example, as the obvious example. Where they go to live in Spain and they just sort of essentially set up an English colony where they only speak English, all the food is English and so on. And that's viewed as a bad thing.
And the leftist always comes to you and goes, but that means that they'd have to integrate. And I'm like, yeah.
Correct. I agree.
Exactly. I completely agree. And if they don't, feel free to kick them out.
But the interesting thing is, see, I actually had a conversation with a girl in a university seminar about this because I made the case. I was the only person in the room to make this case, but I made the case that it's completely reasonable to expect people who are moving from another country to your own to speak your language, and no talk of like integration into the culture or anything like that. Just simply speaking the language. And this was something that was so offensive to her and everybody else in the room that it sparked. We had a heated discussion about this. And I said, all I had to say was, well, okay, because this girl was not from England, right? I said, if I was to come to your country, would you expect me to? If me and my family were to come to your country, would you expect me to speak your language or would you expect me to speak my own? And she obviously said, well, I expect you to speak my language. But then she said, but my country didn't have a globe-spanning empire, this, that, and the other. And I thought, okay, we've touched on something there. Yeah. So is it about revenge? Is it about you get to come here and speak your language because of some collective guilt?
You feel that the British Empire imposed English on your culture. Right, yeah. And it's entirely possible. I mean, honestly, whenever you get at the root of any of these immigration arguments, it's always about revenge. They always trot that out. It's like, well, then I'm going to stop apologizing for the British Empire, aren't I? Anyway, so Robert Peston was like, how could she say that white people do not exist in a special state of sin or collective guilt? Did she go too far? Do you expect a British Home Secretary to say this? I replied to Robert Peston, saying she should say it often, louder. Bellowing it once a day in Parliament might be sufficient. Robert?
At minimum.
At minimum, yeah. But what I love about this is you always get the insane leftist who, for the marks, just is never really on. And then it comes straight off. And Dr. Charlotte Proudman is my favorite example of this. Average white supremacist. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed, typical Aryan woman. Dr. Proudman.
Proudman.
Yes, Proudman. I mean... As a white person, we must recognize our privilege under white supremacy, colonialism, and imperialism. Right. So she's admitting that she's a beneficiary and upholder of white supremacy.
Suella Braverman is saying, white people are not all racist. And Dr. Charlotte Proudman kicks in the door and says, yes, I am.
Exactly. But Dr. Charlotte Proudman looks like your average Aryan. She couldn't look more white. And she's just burst in and exactly. No, we are racist and, quote, we should feel guilty and ashamed.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, Charlotte, I'm not saying that you're not a racist.
No one's going to take that away from you, Charlotte, right? You can be a racist if you want.
And I'm not saying you shouldn't feel guilty and ashamed. I'm just saying I'm not, and I'm not going to, okay? I actually agree with the brown lady.
I agree with the white supremacist on the front of the Daily Express here.
We live in such a clown world, man. Anyway, so... of course, we carry on. It wasn't racist, obviously. And as Suella Braverman continues to point out, reducing immigration is also not racist. Controlling the borders, it's not xenophobic to say that mass migration is not sustainable, obviously. I mean,
but again, from the Home Secretary.
Well, That's exactly what I said. Again,
don't get me wrong, I agree.
Yeah, I totally agree. I posted that on Twitter as well. I was just like, this Suella Braverman is the current Home Secretary. She is the person with the power to control the UK's borders. But we actually found out yesterday that she's not, because she got blocked by her own cabinet. So ministers, she proposed 5 different measures to reduce the amount of immigration to the UK, and only one of these was approved in a limited way. One limited proposal would ban foreign master's students bringing relatives to them with them to the UK, and that is all that's been agreed by the cabinet.
I mean, good, but
that's going to be a tiny proportion.
Yeah.
How many million, thousands of people are coming from foreign master's students' families?
Yeah.
There's such
drop in the bucket.
It's unbelievable. So it's not. It appears that Suella Braverman is not trying to do the thing, but she's being blocked by Rishi Sunak. Basically.
Now, is it just Rishi Sunak? Do we know the names of the people who are actually involved?
We don't know the names, but Rishi Sunak is the Prime Minister, so I'm going to blame him.
Well, fair enough.
I mean, it seems that the buck does stop with him, right? Yeah. And Stephen Edgington reported for The Telegraph, millions more apparently are coming. Millions. We're expecting 1 million net.
Yeah, I saw that statistic. I mean, that's double the previous record that was set last year.
Yeah, which was 500,000.
Yeah.
And that's net. 1.16 million came in and about 600,000 left.
I know this doesn't need to be pointed out to viewers of this show, but, it's just... I mean, as you say, this is net that we're talking here.
Yeah. So it's going to be probably 1.5 million.
Yeah.
Nearly 2 million coming in. I mean, you can see it everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, there's nowhere in Britain that's not touched by this.
No.
A Home Office document, which has been seen by The Telegraph, reveals Braverman was warned last year of upward pressure on visa applications. Applications
that you can say no.
Yeah, not approved. Go on with your day.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Fascist.
Yeah. Not approving something, typical fascism.
Yeah.
But Braverman, again, makes good points. We should be training our own people. We should be encouraging internal markets in that way. She's not wrong at all. Of course, we get LBC carrying on. Has Suella Braverman gone too far, saying that multiculturalism is a recipe for communal disaster? I, of course, replied to this. No, she hasn't gone far enough. But that's all they can say, right? All they can say is, has she gone too far? Well, they can't say she's wrong. Yeah.
She's just strayed too far outside the Overton window. That's what they're saying.
Exactly. Well, we weren't supposed to say that, Suella. It's like, yeah, but she's not wrong.
No.
You can't say she's wrong. It's obviously the case. And it's happening everywhere.
Can I say the comment that she's made there, that multiculturalism is a recipe for communal disaster? I mean, multiculturalism is the active abandonment of integration.
Yes.
That's what it is.
It's a prevention of integration.
Yeah. The incentivization of the opposite, which we obviously are living with the consequences now. And to call that a recipe for communal disaster, to anybody with a brain, it completely makes total sense. I mean, to me it does at least. Because why wouldn't it lead to, disaster is a strong word. Maybe we could use the words like tension, maybe. Why wouldn't it lead to tension with just different sort of blocks, cultural blocks living next to each other, which might have different or opposing views on things?
I think we can commit to disaster.
Yeah, well, as do I, yeah.
But you're completely correct, of course. And she's correct. Angela Merkel was correct when she said it. David Cameron has said it. They've all said it. They know that multiculturalism has
Blair
failed.
said it? I'm sure Blair said it.
I'm sure Blair said it, yeah.
The architect.
Yeah, exactly. The architect of all of this. And so Suella Braverman is right, as she's been consistently right. But there are people on Twitter who point out, look, it's like... oh, sorry, I missed this one. Yeah, so after Suella Braverman said these controversially true things, she was reported to the regulatory body for barristers, because, of course, she was a barrister before she became a politician, because they want to ban her from being a barrister ever again for, quote, racist and discriminatory narratives. Wow. The white supremacist.
Well, I hear white supremacy is quite a diverse,
surprisingly inclusive. But anyway, as people point out on Twitter, it's like the Conservatives don't even realise that they're in power, right? Cabinet ministers giving protest speeches seemingly against themselves. Now, that's very interesting to me, because I think that in a way they aren't, actually. And this is the very reason that NatCon even exists. This is the very reason that GB News exists. The National Conservative Conference should be the Conservative Party conference.
Yes.
That should be the mainstream Conservative Party conference.
Absolutely.
But instead, that has LGBTQ pride stalls and things like that.
The Tony Blair Institute.
Exactly, the Tony Blair Institute, right? And I've made this point about GB News. The reason GB News exists is because it should be what the BBC is.
Yes.
It should be the mainstream media organization, but it's not. It has to be a side thing. So what is the insurgent power that has taken over these structures, and why? And this is the conservative reaction we're seeing to it, like regrouping after being ousted from their own institutions.
I do think for a lot of people, it's quite difficult to understand what it is we're talking about here, because if you look at things on the face of it, we have a conservative party in government with a massive majority, and that to most people the thinking stops there.
Yeah.
It's, oh, well, then in that case, to be left wing must be to be a dissident.
Yeah.
But it's actually, you look a little bit deeper, you come to understand that actually, there is a regime behind the Conservative Party, the machinery of the managerial state, if you want, who are institutionally left wing.
Yes, and that's exactly what Calvin Robinson pointed out. He said he quoted a bunch of conservatives attacking the National Conservative Conference for being socialist, which I found very interesting. But these are all liberal critiques that they are giving, because it's actually not socialist. It is, I guess we'll call it slightly parental, or that sort of... what's the word? It's not parental. It's on the tip of my tongue. Paternal. That's what I'm looking for. It's a more paternal view of the society, right?
Yes.
The people at the top should be looking after the people at the bottom.
Yes.
This is a very anti-liberal view that conceives of all men created at 0.0 as perfect equals and with total freedom.
Yeah.
But that's just not simply how reality is, and this is what conservatives are recognizing. The socialists also think that way to the liberals. But as Calvin says, they are the reason the party is in a mess. And he's right. Liberals within the Conservative Party are the enemy within. Who needs an opposition party? Completely correct.
That's right. Yeah.
Totally undermined the Conservative Party, totally destroyed it from the inside. And I mean, I think a great example of this is at the National Conservative Conference is Michael Gove. Now, I'm not saying I dislike Michael Gove on a personal level or anything like that, but just this answer is just mind-boggling.
I saw this. It's just astonishing. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, so he said, asked to list the key conservative achievements of the past 13 years, Michael Gove says universal credit, school reform, vocational education, a creative economy, more diverse parliament, science policy, Ukraine levelling up. So, right. That sounds like a Lib Dem manifesto.
It does. What in there is conservative? What in there is Burkean?
Yes. And I mean, strangely, no mention of Brexit, which is strange, actually, because you would think the Conservatives would be trying to hammer that point. But of course, there are going to be lots of Remainers in the Conservative Party.
Oh, yeah. Now, I don't know Michael Gove's background, but I don't know. You wonder whether somebody like him, you wonder whether this is the case for a few people in the Tory party, in fact, for many people, whether they actually recognise the difference between liberalism and conservatism, because it's been conflated. The terms have been conflated for so long.
Yeah.
In a way, you almost couldn't blame them for thinking that this is what conservatism is.
Well, I mean, when the Liberal Party essentially got subsumed by the Conservatives, I mean, that was letting the wolf in.
Yes.
With the chickens, and I, at the time, it probably wasn't as sinister as it is now, because of course, compared to the insurgent Labour Party, and they're basically communist. Yeah. The Liberals would have seemed very reasonable and on board with a lot of the Conservative agenda. So it probably seemed pretty harmless. But we've arrived at the point now. I mean, Michael Gove was asked, do you think that basically a lot of some Tory MPs are basically Lib Dems? And he was like, no. If you go to the next one. And sorry, no, he's wrong on this.
Well, he would say that, though, wouldn't he?
Of course he would, because he's basically a Lib Dem, according to his own list of accomplishments of the Conservative Party.
I do find it interesting that this phenomenon that we see of conservative parties being populated by what essentially amount to classical liberals or liberals of some other stripe is, for one thing, very much a English-speaking world phenomenon. Now, obviously it happens elsewhere, but we see it, I mean, you see it across America, you see it across Australia, Canada, and so on. I wonder how much of that is because of something you've talked about in the past, which is classical liberalism in the Lockean sense. It is a very English ideology, right?
Yes.
In that it's English, what I would call English principles, like free speech, and whatever else you want to list.
So essentially, you could summarize as the rights of Englishmen.
Yes. And I think that it's no surprise that somebody an English conservative would look at those principles and think, well, yeah, no, I agree with those things.
I mean, that's literally our ancient tradition.
Well, exactly. But he agrees with those things because he's an Englishman, not for any other reason.
Yes.
And so it's no surprise that, as you say, the wolf gets let in under these auspices, because I think there is a sense, and I even feel this sense in myself, that it is kind of appropriate that we do think in a liberal way as Englishmen.
Yeah.
But it's not this kind of, again, what you would call the sort of universalized
the comprehensive liberalism.
Comprehensive liberalism. Yeah, that's right.
I'm actually going to record a podcast this afternoon with Stelios about this. So that'll be out in next week probably, talking about this problem. And you make a great point about the English-speaking world's problem, though, because if you look at continental parties, you get a great deal of plurality, of a fracturing of the political landscape along stark ideological lines that basically broadly lines up in coalition. It's very interesting how we don't do that. That's a great point. But anyway, so one conservative MP made a good point. Danny Kruger was like, families are good. The normative family, the mother and father sticking together for the sake of the children, is the only basis for a safe and functioning society. Marriage is not only about you, it's a public act to live for the sake of someone else.
Did he then go on to talk about how, we need to ban divorce for any reason?
Well, I wasn't at the conference, so I've only got the clips that have been put out.
One wonders if he does, because, that's the logical next step.
But that's not a terribly controversial statement in and of itself.
Well, no. I mean, again, we're talking about this low-hanging fruit that we have here.
Yeah.
The family is good.
Yeah. But I mean, again, at the end of the day, at least they're finding their foundations. Right?
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. I don't want to be negative here because this is good.
But it shows the dire state that the country's in, right? But even more dire than that, it seems that Rishi Sunak has rejected this proposition. Doesn't agree, right? A spokesman for the Prime Minister told journalists that this is not the government's view. The spokesman said that the government minister speaking at the conference did not mean that the government endorsed all the views there. When pressed on whether Sunak agreed with Kruger about normative family being the only basis for a safe and functioning society, the spokesman simply replied, no.
Well, what does he think is the foundation of a safe and functioning society then? Is it the individual?
What do you mean, no?
Yeah.
What do you mean, no? Oh, yeah, exactly. What is?
Yeah.
How do good
individuals... What could be?
Yeah, exactly. What could be?
Yeah.
How do good individuals get raised? Are we going to move into some sort of brave new world where we get decanted out of a baby generator and then raised in like state nurseries? Is that the foundation of a good society? Like, what are you asking for? Just new. So, okay.
But why? I mean, why? I just can't understand why someone like Rishi Sunak, who, I mean, he's not a particularly conservative politician.
He's very Lib Demish, isn't he?
He is. But I just can't understand why he would say something like that. Because again, you have to ask the question, well, what does he think is the foundation of society then? Because the conservative, I would say, the conservative perspective is that the family is the fundamental unit of society, not the individual.
I mean, this is the Lockean liberal perspective.
Yeah.
Locke believed that societies first came together as what he called conjugal societies in man and women, getting married, having children, and then these groups
and a few families get together, form a village, and so on.
And this train of thought goes back to Aristotle, who thought exactly the same thing. So it's it far predates liberalism because it seems to be the way that society is built.
Nature,
yeah, exactly. It seems to be how things actually are, right? So I would love to know what Rishi Sunak's opinion on that is. But anyway, moving on, Douglas Murray gave a speech, which I don't doubt was amazing. But there was one part in the speech that he framed something in a way that really stoked the ire of the left. He said, I see no reason why every other country in the world should be prevented from feeling pride in itself because the Germans mucked up twice in a century. As a Jew, the laughter and round of applause after he says the Germans mucked up nationalism genuinely makes me physically sick. Let's not use euphemisms. Nazis bad. So yes, Nazis bad. The reason that this got Douglas Murray in such trouble is because he put himself in the same frame, spoke within the frame that included the Nazis. And I don't think that we should be speaking within the frame that includes the Nazis. I don't think he meant that either.
It's not helpful. But what he's saying is true.
Yes, what he is saying is true. But the framing of it is obviously British irony, but it does lend you to being vulnerable from attacks from uncharitable people who will say, see, he's saying he's a Nazi and the Nazis just got it wrong.
Yeah.
Right? And that's not what he's saying, obviously. He's saying that, look, just because the Germans are mental doesn't mean that we can't love our country. Small mistake there, but again, it takes a very uncharitable reading to give that interpretation. Anyone who is familiar with Douglas Murray will be like, well, he's not a Nazi, so he's not in support of the Nazis. Yeah. So anyway, one thing that I did like was Matt Goodwin's speech. I like how understated Matt Goodwin is, because if you actually read what he says, I read his entire Substack, it was really good. If you actually read what he says, it's quite radical, actually, but he presents it in a very moderate and temperate way.
Well, that has to be the strategy. I mean, you speak, us both here as sensible centrists, of course.
Very much.
That has to be the strategy.
Yes, absolutely. But I'll just read a quick quote from it. The people got a Conservative Party which had failed. They got a party which no longer knows what it is or what it wants. They got a party that still thinks it's living in 1988 rather than 2023. They got a party so obsessed with rehashing old arguments about economic freedom that it's failed to realize that many voters are also crying out for cultural freedom. Freedom from mass immigration, stifling political correctness, and a dogmatic new elites.
That's excellent. Now, the attacking of the economic there is what I really like. Yeah, me too. Because that's something that I am I feel very strongly about, is this monomaniacal focus on economic, on growth, on
libertarian view.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's very strong.
Yeah, and we'll finish on this. This has gone on a bit, but there's a lot here, and Connor's going to go on way more about this tomorrow, but I think it's really worth it. David Starkey, a quick report from Connor here at the event. Starkey's address to the National Conservative Talk Conference was excellent. Each British revolution has been to preserve its institutions from contamination by progressive forces. Reverence for Anglo culture must not be conflated with nationalisms for other failed continental European traditions, or browbeat into self-effacing apologies by activists who seek to tear our civilization asunder to build atop the ashes their self-empowering but impossible utopian ideological projects. I mean, every word is symphony as far as I'm concerned. Connor, really well done. But I personally, I'm really looking forward to his coverage tomorrow, because it's going to be a lot more in depth than mine, because I wasn't there. But generally, I view the National Conservative Conference as a win.
Yeah, well, as we were saying, it's we have to take our wins where we can, because we are the dissidents in this political system. So when we see people like this all getting together in a room, I mean, we were saying you've got Jacob Rees-Mogg and Michael Gove on stage, and then you've got someone like Alex Kashuta, who has interviewed people like Curtis Yarvin. And it's like these people are in the same room together, talking to the same crowd, in the same green room, perhaps. And that can only be a good thing. Yeah. Because, we talk on the right so much about the importance of organisation, and about how, the organised 100 will always defeat the disorganised 1,000. Well, that's what that looks like. This is what that looks like.
And the reaction the left has had to this clearly shows we're over the target. If this was something comical that they had they didn't feel threatened by, they're just like, look, you idiots. And they carry on with their day. Instead, they're freaking out and calling everything names.
Yes.
Okay, well, you're over the target, so keep going.
I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters. And if you want to support the work we're doing, you can sign up to the website and watch videos like this. This is Symposium number 18, Debating Classical Liberalism, where Stelios debates in favour and Carl debates against. And if you want to find out what Stelios is doing, you can check out his Twitter here. Thank you very much for watching.